There are nights that start out ordinary, but take a turn you never see coming. This was one of those nights. When you think it's over, things take an even crazier turn. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one, dear listeners. Before we move forward, please subscribe my channel to hit 1,000 figure. Clint Eastwood walked into Murphy's Bar, a dimly lit dive joint on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the floors were sticky. The beer was cheap, and trouble was always just one wrong glance away. But Clint wasn't looking for trouble. Not tonight. At his side, his loyal companion Clyde, the orangutan, ambled along, earning a few raised eyebrows but mostly amused smirks from the regulars. Clyde wasn't just any pet. He was Clint's partner in crime, a troublemaker with charm. Clint just wanted a cold beer and a quiet night. But in bars like this, peace never lasted long. Across the room, a group of rowdy bikers sat at a corner table, laughing loudly, knocking back shots. The Black Widows, a gang with more attitude than sense. They were the kind of guys who loved picking fights just to prove something. And when they spotted Clint and Clyde, they saw an opportunity. One of the bikers, a muscle-bound loudmouth, leaned back in his chair and smirked. Well, well, look who just walked in. A cowboy and his pet monkey. The bar went silent. Clint didn't react. He took a slow sip of his beer, unfazed. But Clyde? Clyde tilted his head, blinked, and then casually flipped the biker the middle finger. The bar erupted in laughter, except for the bikers. Their leader's face turned red with anger. He slammed his drink down and stood up. "You think that's funny, old man?" Clint sighed, placing his beer back on the counter. He knew exactly where this was going. And just like that, the night took a turn. The air inside Murphy's Bar grew thick with tension. Conversations died down. Chairs scraped against the wooden floor as people shifted to the edges of the room. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Clint Eastwood remained calm, his fingers lightly tapping against his beer glass. He had seen this kind of situation 100 times before. The loudmouth biker, still fuming from Clyde's perfectly executed middle finger, took a step closer. "You got a smart mouth, old man, and that thing," he gestured at Clyde, "ain't got no place in here." Clint exhaled slowly, finally looking up at the biker. That famous Eastwood glare. Cold, unreadable, dangerous. "You sure you want to do this, kid?" Clint's voice was calm, measured, like he was giving the guy one last chance. The biker grinned, cracking his knuckles. He was twice the size of Clint, younger, meaner. He thought he had already won. And then he threw the first punch. Big mistake. In a move so fast most of the bar didn't even register it. Clint sidestepped, grabbed the biker's wrist, and twisted. A loud crack echoed through the bar as the biker howled in pain, dropping to his knees. The rest of the Black Widows shot up from their seats, knocking over chairs, grabbing bottles. This wasn't going to be a one-on-one fight anymore. Clyde let out a deep grunt, tilting his head. He knew what was coming. Clint calmly let go of the groaning biker's wrist, dusted off his hands, and sighed. "Well," he muttered to himself, "so much for a quiet drink." And then all hell broke loose. Before Clint could take another breath, a chair flew past his head, smashing against the bar counter. The entire place erupted into pure chaos. The Black Widows weren't the type to back down. 3 of them charged at Clint at once, fists clenched, eyes burning with rage. But Clint? He barely moved. He had been in too many fights to be rattled by a bunch of wannabe tough guys. The first biker lunged. Clint ducked, grabbing the guy by his jacket and sending him crashing into a table. The second swung wildly. Clint dodged, countered with a quick jab to the ribs, sending the man gasping for air. The third one hesitated just a second too long, and that's when Clyde stepped in. With a loud grunt, the orangutan swung his massive arm and smacked the guy across the face, sending him sprawling over a table. The entire bar burst into laughter, except for the bikers. "You gotta be kidding me," one of them shouted, scrambling back to his feet. Clyde, now fully enjoying himself, grabbed a half-empty beer mug and chugged it down, slamming it back on the table like a seasoned drinker. The bartender, instead of being mad, just shook his head. This was already the best fight he'd seen in years. Meanwhile, Clint dodged another punch, grabbed a pool cue off a nearby table, and cracked it across a biker's legs, sending him tumbling. The bar had officially turned into a battlefield, fists flying, chairs breaking, bottles shattering. But through it all, Clint remained cool, controlled, and 2 steps ahead of every move. Clyde, on the other hand, was just having fun, grabbing drinks, swatting at bikers, and even stealing a bag of peanuts from the bar counter. But the fight wasn't over yet. One of the biggest bikers, easily twice Clint's size, stood up from the wreckage, cracked his neck, and grinned. "All right, old man, let's see if you're still tough." Clint wiped a small cut on his lip, narrowed his eyes, and smirked. "Kid, you have no idea." The bar was a wreck, tables overturned, glass shards scattered across the floor, and the lingering scent of spilled beer filled the air. The fight had been wild, but it wasn't over yet. As Clint Eastwood straightened up, he locked eyes with the last man standing, the biggest, meanest biker in the bar. The guy had shoulders like a grizzly bear, tattoos crawling up his neck, and a smirk that said he was ready to break bones. The rest of the Black Widows groaned on the floor, some clutching their ribs, others wiping blood from their lips. But the big guy? He was just getting started. He cracked his knuckles, rolling his neck from side to side. "That was cute, old man, but I ain't like them. You ain't walking away from this one." Clint didn't flinch. Instead, he took a slow breath and muttered, "You kids talk too damn much." Then the biker charged. He came in fast, swinging a fist the size of a sledgehammer straight at Clint's head. But Clint, always calm under pressure, sidestepped at the last second, causing the brute to crash into a table. The impact sent glasses and plates flying. The bar erupted into laughter, except for the Black Widows. The biker growled, stumbling back to his feet, his face red with rage. "You're dead, old man." This time, he went for a tackle, hoping to use his sheer size to take Clint down. But Clint had dealt with plenty of guys like this before, big, strong, but too slow. As the biker lunged, Clint stepped aside again and grabbed the man's arm, twisting it with precise force. A loud crack filled the bar as the brute let out a howl of pain. The room fell silent. Even Clyde stopped mid-bite, a half-eaten peanut hanging from his lips, watching intently. The biker dropped to his knees, gripping his shoulder in pain. Clint leaned down slightly, speaking just loud enough for him to hear. "Told you, kid. You ain't built for this." Clyde, as if understanding the perfect moment for comedic timing, reached out and smacked the biker on the back of the head. The bar roared with laughter, and even the bartender, who had been watching with a mix of amusement and concern, couldn't help but grin. But then, a new sound cut through the chaos, the sound of sirens in the distance. Someone had called the cops. And just like that, the fight wasn't the biggest problem anymore. The distant wail of sirens sent a ripple of realization through the bar. What had started as a wild, beer-fueled brawl was now turning into something else, something that involved cops, questions, and paperwork Clint had no patience for. The Black Widows, or at least the ones who were still conscious, staggered to their feet, groaning, bruised, and completely humiliated. Their leader, still clutching his twisted arm, shot Clint a furious glare. "This ain't over, old man," he spat, wincing. Clint smirked. "It is for you, kid." Then, without missing a beat, Clint turned to Clyde. The orangutan was still seated at the bar, happily munching on a stolen bag of peanuts. "Clyde," Clint said, his voice calm as ever. "Let's get out of here." Clyde grunted in agreement, tossed the peanut shells over his shoulder, and hopped down from his stool. But the front door was out of the question. The cops would be there any second. So Clint did what he did best. He improvised. He turned to the bartender, a grizzled old man who had seen more bar fights than he could count. "Back door?" Clint asked. The bartender, barely suppressing a grin, jerked his thumb toward the kitchen. "Go, before I gotta lie to the cops." Clint gave a small nod of thanks, then motioned to Clyde. Together, they slipped past the broken tables, stepping over groaning bikers, and ducked into the back hallway. They pushed through the kitchen, dodging confused cooks, and burst out into the alleyway just as the first cop cars pulled up out front. Clyde let out a low grunt, almost like a chuckle. Clint adjusted his jacket, wiped the blood from his lip, and looked up at the night sky. "Just another quiet evening," he muttered to himself. Then, with Clyde by his side, Clint walked off into the night. Another fight won, another story for the books, and another reason why no one should ever mess with Clint Eastwood.